Hey everybody, welcome back to Living in Lexington, Kentucky. This is Ben Murphy. I'm a realtor with eXp Realty here in Lexington. In today's video, we are actually going to talk about a discussion that happens almost every single day when you're talking to new clients, especially clients who are thinking about making that first purchase and getting out of renting. So in this video, ladies and gentlemen, we're actually going to talk about the pros and cons of renting a home versus buying a home. Let's get to it. So the first and easy way to call this out, we're going to talk about pros of renting real quick. So the first pro of renting, it's easy to move. Really, I mean, when you rent, you aren't necessarily tied down to a location for a very extended period of time. Most leases are a year, and so sometimes you can find 6 month leases, sometimes you can do 18-month leases. It really just depends on the landlord. So if you are testing the water, so to speak, if you are moving to a new area, renting is sometimes a good option because you don't have to necessarily be tied down to a spot. Whereas if you buy a home, you are stuck there unless you find someone else to buy that home. Whereas renting, you don't have to find the next person that's going to come live in your home. You can just leave. And so that's an easy pro when it comes to renting. Okay, so when it comes to renting again, another pro to consider is there's no real down payment. Most will ask for a security deposit. I mean, that can range depending on the property. I mean, you can have it between $200 to $500, maybe $1,000, but you get that back once you leave. So it's not necessarily like buying a house where you have to save up money for a down payment, because a lot of mortgage companies, a lot of banks are going to require you to put some sort of money up front, and a lot of if you're a first-time home buyer, many times you don't have a lot of much money saved up. And so again, that's a pro towards renting. You don't have to necessarily put a lot of money down to sign a lease and move into a home or an apartment. So the third pro when it comes to renting, this is probably most people's favorites. There are no taxes on your property. You don't have to pay for the taxes that are on the property that you are renting, and you don't have to pay for the maintenance. So if something breaks, your refrigerator breaks, if they provided washing machines, washer and dryer, and that breaks, they have to fix it. The landlord it has to come and fix those pieces of equipment. So that is a huge financial cost in the long run if you are a homeowner, because if something breaks, you got to pay for it. You got to fix it. Our water heater went out probably in the first month and a half that we moved into the place, but luckily it was an easy fix. I was able to watch a couple of YouTube videos and I was able to exchange the parts. But a landlord would have had to have figured that out instead of me, and they would have done it in a pretty reasonable amount of time. So again, that's a pro when it comes to renting versus necessarily owning your home. Final pro that I'm going to talk about when it comes to renting, ladies and gentlemen, more times than not, renting is cheaper than owning a home. Now, let me kind of rephrase that just a little bit. Sometimes, especially if it's your first home may not be as nice as the townhome or the apartment or the condo that you are currently renting at a cheaper price. Now, just understand that that's kind of normal, especially when it comes to your first home. Your first home is your starter home. That's why they call it your starter home. It is to get you off the ground and get you to that next house. So again, but it can be a pro if you are trying to save up for maybe that nicer house. I don't know. It just depends on your technical financial situation. But sometimes, more times than not, the rent is technically cheaper, again, depending on how much square footage and all that other jazz that you're looking at. I tell people, be careful. Try to do the math, because if you're trying to rent a single family home, you might just actually be paying a mortgage payment. And that you could be paying your mortgage payment instead of paying the landlord's mortgage. That was one thing that I learned when I first got into real estate. One of the brokers that I worked under, she would always tell me, it's like, Ben, you're paying someone's mortgage. Whether you believe it or not, if you're renting, you're paying the landlord's mortgage. If you're owning your own home, you're paying your mortgage. No matter what, you're paying a mortgage. So that's something to think about as we continue to talk about this. So pro number one, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to owning your own home, I know this may seem a little bit weird, but I think stability actually is a pro when it comes to owning your own home. Knowing that you're going to be in the same spot for a while actually brings a sigh of relief knowing that there's no lease coming up, that you might have to find a new home because the landlord decides to sell your property, or your rent's going up, things like that. You don't necessarily have to worry about that because you understand the long-term goals and the financing plans for your property. And so there is some stability in there, and there's a lot of calmness that comes to owning your own home because you know that you're going to be here. You're not going to have to worry about finding that next location or that next property for you and your family. So the second pro I want to talk about when it comes to owning your own home, and it's probably one of the most important ones, it builds equity. Now, let me explain that real quick. Equity, ladies and gentlemen, is when you're putting money into an investment, and so once you've paid off all your mortgage, you got a ton of equity. So if you've bought a $250,000 house and you pay off that mortgage in 30 years, I mean, you've got $250,000 in equity. Okay, you've got $250,000 to go to that next house, or go towards your retirement, or go towards your next property that you're downsizing, or maybe you want to make a purchase on an investment property and you take that equity and you take it towards that property. It's a huge financial advantage when it comes to owning your own property. And so, when you put money into it, it builds and it grows. We bought our house, there was no fence. We put a privacy fence in the backyard. We're looking at putting some other things involved in the house. So when we do decide to sell this house, this is technically our starter home, and I mean, we're going to have a lot of equity coming into this house. So it's a long-term investment plan, and that's why a lot of people say owning a home is an American dream. It truly can be if you do it right and you take care of your property. So just a pro you got to consider when it comes to deciding between renting versus buying. I mean, you're putting so much money away in equity, and it's just going to help you long term. So the third pro when it comes to owning your own home, it's your home. You can do what you want with it. Like that's kind of one of the fun things about it. It's like when it comes to renting, you're like, I don't know if I can hang this, or I don't know if I can install this. I don't know if I can actually paint this. When it's your house, ladies and gentlemen. You can do whatever you want with it. I know I talked in the previous pro, we put up a fence. Depending on where you live, renting wise, you can't put up a fence. Like, you can't put something that major. What if we want to put in a smaller pool in our backyard? You can't do that when you're renting, but you can do that when you own a home. And that's what's, again, the cool thing about owning your own property, is because you can do what you want with it. It's your property. You can do what you want. You can make it your own. If you want to do an add-on, you want to add on maybe a master bath to the backside of your house that connects to your master bedroom, you can do that. That's fine. Yes, it costs money, but again, it's your property. You get to decide how you live here and how you want to make it your home and your own. And that's, again, a huge pro when it comes to buying your home versus renting a home, because rental, you are hamstrung on what you can and cannot do to that property. Okay, so the final pro that I'm going to talk about, depending on your financial situation, depending on the home that you get, sometimes it's cheaper than renting. Again, it depends on the situation, but I've got a mortgage right now that is actually cheaper than this townhome that we were living in Lexington, except we own this property. So again, depending on where you're at and depending on what you're looking for, owning your own property sometimes, not a lot of times, is actually cheaper than renting, especially the fact that a lot of renting prices are going up and up and up and up. You might as well own your own property at this point. And again, with all the other pros that go along with it, it makes more sense than to be paying off some landlord's mortgage at that point. So kind of a pro to think about when it comes to comparing and contrasting the pros and cons of renting a home or owning your own home. All right, everybody, before we continue with the video, please do me a quick favor. Give this video a quick like. This is going to help especially a lot of people who are thinking about making that first purchase or thinking about maybe downsizing and just renting for a minute. This is going to be some valuable information for them. If you're someone that's thinking about making that first purchase of your home, you got to do two things. First, you got to hit that subscribe button, and then you got to shoot me an email, shoot me a text, let me know that you're thinking about it. I'd love to sit down with you and talk about your options and see what we could do. If owning your home is one of your dreams, then we're going to make that happen for you. Let's get back to the video. All right, so now let's talk about the cons when it comes to renting. Probably the easiest one right out of the gate. I've kind of touched on this before when talking about the pros. You walk away with no money. One thing I like to tell my friends who are still renting right now, you're not putting away any equity, and by the way, you're also paying 100% interest. I know the interest rates right now are between 6 and 7%. If you're watching this video right now, we're in the middle of the early stages of 2023. So the interest rates are kind of flirting with that 7% range. Ladies and gentlemen, rent is 100% interest, and you get none of that money back when you walk away. So again, that goes back to building up equity down the long line. It just goes towards your future. You don't get to take any of that money with you that you just paid off, and it can be a burden for you if you are just stuck renting and renting and renting and renting. So that's an easy con to consider when it comes to thinking about buying a home versus renting a home. So another con that you need to consider when it comes to renting, especially if you're renting like a home, is what happens when the landlord decides to sell the property. I mean, you now have to leave. Like there's no stability anymore. You are on a time clock and you need to figure out a new place to live. And that can be very, very frustrating. It can be very, very stressful. So again, a con that you've got to consider is there is no stability. So the landlord can just say, okay, we're done. You need to leave. And depending on what state you're in, depending on the laws, some state laws, he can sell the property, and as soon as that lease is up, you have to be gone. Some say you can break the lease the moment you sell the property. It just, again, depends on where you're at. So something to consider when you are renting is, at any point, that can no longer be an option for you. So an easy con for when it comes to renting, ladies and gentlemen, is there's a lot of restrictions. I mean, some majority places don't want pets. You can't have any extra roommates. So if, a family member needs to come stay with you, for a minute, you can't have prolonged guests, sort of those things. You can't do certain things to the homes, like you can't redo any kind of remodeling. Sometimes you can't do painting. So just understand that when it comes to cons of renting, there's a lot you cannot do and you cannot have. And so, I mean, me and my wife, you all know, we've got dogs and we've got a cat and we've just started getting chickens. You can't have any of that when it comes to renting a property. So easy con, something to consider. Final con, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to renting, and it is an ugly truth, rents go up. Rents have been going up consistently, and especially recently once kind of all the COVID restrictions have kind of loosened up. A lot of landlords want to make that money back because there was a lot of money lost in 2020 for a lot of landlords. And so I know they're probably trying to start to make that money back. And so I've helped recent buyers purchase their first home because they knew their rent was going to go up and it was going to be more than the mortgage they're paying currently on the house that I helped get them. So you got to be ready for that, especially when it comes to renting. Yeah, it might have some perks, but financially, long term, it is not a strong strategy, and it's something to consider when, thinking about buying that first home. All right, so let's talk about cons for buying a home and owning a home. Probably the easiest one is it's a lot of money, lots of costs. So I've talked about it before in the pro section, but if something breaks, it's on you to fix it. You got to take care of it. You are responsible for it. That refrigerator goes down, man, you got to figure out what's wrong with it, and you got to get that sucker fixed, or you got to get yourself a new one. So, but it's an overtime issue. I know sometimes you might buy a home, if you didn't get it inspected, it has a lot of problems with it. It's an older home. A lot of things start falling apart, and it happened to fall apart on you. It didn't fall apart on the previous homeowner. So that is just a con of owning a home, and it's something to consider. So something that we do, we try to make sure that we run the inspections. We know exactly who I need to call. I've got 3 or 4 inspectors that are phenomenal at their jobs. If there's something wrong with the house, they will know about it. They'll tell you, hey, this is going to be a problem down the road. You need to be aware of that. And we're able to either move on to another home or get that issue resolved, so that won't be your issue when you move in. So again, a con to consider when you're thinking about buying that first home or buying a home in particular. The second con when it comes to owning your own home is actually moving. That is a con because a lot of times I work with buyers who have to sell a home to help finance the purchase of their next home because that's just how it worked out financially with their mortgage lender or their bank. So it's a little bit of a struggle moving from one to the other. Now, I'll be honest with you, when I get a hold of sellers and talk to them and we consult months in advance, we're able to predict, see what the market's going to do, see what prices are doing in that neighborhood, and we can watch it, and we can be a little bit more efficient about it because we are planning ahead and we're thinking ahead at that point versus, oh my God, I got to move right now. renting, you can almost break a lease, pay a little bit of a fine and walk right out the door. But when it comes to selling your house, it could be difficult. We're no longer in the 2020 market anymore where you could just put a sign in the front yard and sell your house in 3 hours. Sometimes it's taking a minute. I mean, for us, we're averaging between 3 to 7 days because we're very, very efficient on how we price homes, how we list homes, the marketing that we do for that, and we make sure that we get that client taken care of. We get them the highest dollar with the least amount of stress possible. So it still can be a struggle because I know not all realtors are created the same. You can see a house sitting on the market for 2 months, nothing wrong with it. It's just completely overpriced, and that's why we try to coach our clients and let them know this is what the market's doing, this is what homes are doing, this is how we're going to make sure we sell your home based on what the market's telling us. So con number 3 when it comes to owning your own home, ladies and gentlemen, is there are hidden costs that you aren't going to be aware of, and it comes with taxes, maintenance. There could be liens on the property. There can be things that come up. An HOA might develop in your neighborhood that you weren't planning on, and so cost is going to be the probably biggest con when it comes to owning our home because it's yours. You have to take care of it. It's all on you. There's no one else coming to save the day. There's no landlord to come save the day, and that's scary for a lot of people. But again, we go back to the pros. The equity that you're building in the long run is going to pay over dividends what you pay in the long run versus like with maintenance and other hidden costs of that nature. Final con when it comes to buying your first home or buying a home, ladies and gentlemen, is the cost. There is a lot of cost when it comes to making that first purchase or making any purchase of a home. And if you've never done it before, it adds up very, very quickly. I get to work with a lot of first-time home buyers. It's a fun part of my job. I try to make sure that they understand the financial commitment up front that they have to be ready for. So if you're doing a conventional loan, many times the mortgages or the banks are going to ask you to put up to 20% down. It's a lot of money, So think about whatever home you're thinking about buying, whether it be $200,000 or $250,000. You take 20% right of that out of the gate. That's what you're paying down. And then you get the mortgage for $180,000 or $230,000 that you pay off over time. So again, think about those costs up front. And again, that's one of the cons versus renting. Renting, there's no down payment. There's a huge con when it comes to buying a home because you've got closing costs, you've got movers fees if you're using a moving company, if you're need to buy furniture, because you've been renting, maybe they furnished the entire apartment. So now you got to buy furniture, you got to buy a refrigerator, you got to buy a washer and dryer, you got to buy certain things, or maybe there's a maintenance cost that you got to fix right out of the gate for your home. So those things add up. And so it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be doing it. I just try to help first-time home buyers like, listen, this is what's going to cost. Do we have it? If the answer is no, like, okay, how about a year from now? Will we have it then? Is it 2 years from now? Now we're creating a plan, a financial plan for you to get you to that home. Okay, now there's a goal for you. Now you're setting yourself up. Now you're saving money. And again, that's where being a pro for renting, you don't have to worry about maintenance and other hidden costs and labor that you have the opportunity to save some money and make that first purchase. That does it for today's video, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, you got to give that video a quick like. And if you, again, are thinking about moving to the Lexington, Kentucky area, or if you already live here and you're thinking about making that first purchase, you got to subscribe to the channel. We're posting 3 to 4 videos every single week. And you also got to do one more thing. If you are trying to plan to move to the area, you got to shoot me a quick email, shoot me a quick text, or give me a phone call so we can schedule a buyer's consultation and make sure that we are ready to go for you when you arrive. I've literally just had 2 different couples, one from New York, one from Florida, come in. They reached out to me months ago, and we were able to schedule and block off time to make sure that when they did arrive, we hit the ground running and we were able to find them a home usually on day 1. So planning ahead definitely helps that out. So make sure if you are considering either selling your home or buying your home in the area, you got to hit that subscribe button, shoot me an email, and we'll make sure we take care of you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. Ben Murphy. I'm with eXp Realty here in Lexington, Kentucky. This is Living in Lexington. You guys have a good day.